I was working the night shift, so I would get in about 2:30 and work till, 11:30 after the evening newscast. And I would go into work after a couple weeks, and I'd open my desk drawer and there would be a handwritten note outlining all the mistakes I had made, anonymous, and telling me to go back, go away.
Well, Susan, I am really excited to chat today. You have a wealth of experience in HR and as a leadership coach. And I don't actually get very many guests in the HR world or had been in the HR world. So I'm always especially excited because I would love to help kind of break the stigma around HR. I was actually seeing a couple of memes against HR today in my Instagram feed. And I thought, well, it's good timing that I'm talking to Susan too, because I feel like there's a lot of just negativity around what it means to be in HR. And not everybody understands the help and the support that a really great HR leader can provide for them. So, share a little bit about your background, your journey thus far, and what brought you into this world.
So, interestingly enough, my first career was in broadcast journalism, and this will make sense as to why eventually I transitioned into HR. From childhood on, I had wanted to be a broadcast journalist. Those were what my degrees was in. I had one original job, and then I got promoted to a main anchor job in a sister city. And I was there working. I was very young. I was, I guess, 23, 24 at the most. And I started to be bullied. I went into the job, and this was back in the day. I was working the night shift, so I would get in about 2:30 and work till, 11:30 after the evening newscast. And I would go into work after a couple weeks, and I'd open my desk drawer and there would be a handwritten note outlining all the mistakes I had made, anonymous, and telling me to go back, go away. And it continued. The first time I was just so shocked and upset because these were my coworkers, right? I mean, you get in the world that viewers can write in and call in and say anything. They don't know you. These are my coworkers. These are people who are looking me in the face. I am working alongside every day, and it's anonymous. And it didn't happen once, didn't happen twice. It continually happened that any mispronounced word, any stumble, any fumble. And I started to feel just tremendously anxious and afraid. We had no HR to call. So, I mean, this is a really key thing. I went to my boss at the time, the news director, and he sort of shrugged it off. Like, they're just jealous. I went to the technical director, the person's calling the camera. So I went to the only two people who were in a leadership chain and told them first, and neither offered any help. There was no one to go to. So this took a few months, but this was such a hard lesson. And I really felt like my dream career and job was over before I began. And I was having different stress illnesses, ringing in my ears, my stomach was churning. One day I realized that I needed to be my own self-advocate. This was not going to get better, right? I had tried to reach out for help. So I did a couple things. I got better. I was brand new in the job. I was very young. I hired a speech coach to help me with very difficult names. I was in a part of the country where I didn't grow up, and both the accent and the pronunciation isn't what you thought it would be necessarily. So I got some help, and that really cut down on some of the mistakes that if I had been in a supportive environment, I could have had more help with. But I sort of went in very blind and didn't know what I didn't know. So I learned a lot of lessons. So I got better. I then, as the notes continued, I one day decided to go in early, and I took a conference room and I met with everyone in the newsroom one at a time, showed them the notes. I'd kept them, right? A number of handwritten notes. I said, you don't have to tell me if it's you. You don't have to tell me if you know who it is, but this has to stop. I'm a person. I'm a professional. I know I am not perfect. I need help, not this. I never got a note again. To this day, this is honestly 30 years ago. I don't know who wrote the notes. I never found out. I recognized after that period, that wasn't a culture or an environment I wanted to be in. It was clearly a non supportive, lacking leadership. And so I did look for another job. I got better. I self advocated, stopped the bullying, and I realized it isn't where I wanted to be. And I got a job in a much bigger market. Ironically, it's where I ended up meeting my husband, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that experience of being with terrible leaders in a bad culture with no one to help, that when I was ready to leave my career in television news, and I stayed at it another 11, 12 years, and I made the switch, honestly, HR was really compelling in that they are the custodians. If done right, if done the way I believe the company I worked for did it. They are strategic partners. They set the culture and they're employee advocates. There's someone to call. So I know that the memes about, people pushers, and I'm here to help pencil pushers and paper pushers. That's not the calling of true HR. If there had been an HR professional, that person would have intervened on my behalf. They would have coached me to become better. They would have helped coached me to immediately stop the bullying and the leaders. And they would have said, what is happening in this newsroom? That it is this culture. So that's a long story, but it happened at the very start of my career and it changed everything. It's what helped me to climb corporate ranks and become a vice president and lead large functions. It's what helped me to be a very proud HR person because when you don't have that, and I'm not saying everyone is, you are just on your own and it can be extremely damaging. So that's sort of my spiel.
That's an incredible story. I'm appalled at the behavior of folks that you worked with and really proud to hear how you handled it too and stood up for yourself, got the help that you needed despite not having access to those resources at the company in the newsroom. So what a powerful story. It just transformation overall. And now you're using it to help other people, which is just wonderful, Susan. So I'm glad you shared that with us. Tell us a little bit about what it means to practice building resilience and how we can clarify our purpose, whether we're in HR or not, right? We might have the help, we might not. At some point at the end of the day, we have to be leaders of ourselves first and foremost. So, how do we start to generate that? You talk a little bit about using creative practice to build that up.
Yeah. So thank you, Rebecca, for the question. At the end of the day, we do have to rely on ourselves. And I think there's a couple key ways to do it. One is separate yourself from the emotion, the hurt, the disappointment, the fear, the anger, right? Whatever you're feeling when you've been knocked down. I like using a creative practice because creativity is the best antidote out there for anxiety. And many times when things aren't going the way we want, those are all the emotions I laid out under the root is sort of fear and anxious thoughts. So when you move to creativity, you're really moving to that right side of your brain, which creates possibility, integration. I like to play with either written journaling or even art, but in a journal that you're not showing anyone, you're playing with color. It takes us back to being a child where you're just playing to explore. That helps relax us, huge mental health benefits. And it really starts to remind us that we are more resilient. It creates a safe container and gives you a better perspective. It's very easy. We all do it. It's human nature. When we're in a difficult time, we get into that stuck thought loop and going round and round and round. Many times you're catastrophizing, right? I was telling my story. This is the end of my dream, right? I was 23, 24. It's like, my career is over. At the time there were 220 other TV markets in the country, right? It felt that way, right? Our worlds get very small. And when you build in a creative practice, it expands your world. It creates that what if. It creates a safe space and it can really knock you out of that doom loop. So when you talk about in my coaching and an early lesson, those were all things that really, really helped me.
Love how you describe that, and I've not heard that advice from anyone before. There's a lot of practical advice there, and I imagine too there it's almost a holistic kind of practice where you're feeding your spiritual, your mental, the intelligence that you have, but also you're giving your body and your brain a chance to relax if you can tap into that creative side and not and kind of stop that ongoing flow of analyzing and over analyzing that I think we can all probably get stuck in as leaders. And that brings me to my next question as a recovering perfectionist personally. It can be really hard to stop analyzing. And I like to also believe that I'm a creative person too. But sometimes perfectionism, regardless of where we're at in our journey with it, it can get us stuck and it can get in our way as a roadblock as leaders. So, what's your process for handling that? How do you coach someone through the perfectionist side of things?
Right. So I view myself as a recovering perfectionist, and every day it's a challenge. One of the best exercises, and I did a TEDx talk and I do workshops about this and I have clients, is we take 3 minutes, just 3 minutes, put on your favorite song, look on your phone or whatever. And many songs are 3 to 4 minutes and two crayons and you just fill a piece of paper. So it's a really constrained exercise. There is no expectation. I've never met an adult who's holding a crayon and takes themselves seriously. I just haven't met them yet. And I've been doing this now for several years. And that's what's so great about it is it kicks you over to play. It's extremely constrained. Once again, most adults don't think they're going to do something perfect in 3 minutes, right? In terms of a creative space. And then you put on some music and that really frees us. That music is so powerful, as is any creative outlet. So the music, the crayon, the childlike tool, the 3 minutes, and the really clear instruction, just fill the piece of paper, right? It's like 8 by 10. It can even be a 5 by 7. You can scribble, you can doodle, you can draw shapes, you can draw hearts, whatever. You have no constraint, and then you're going to throw it away. So what the exercise does, and I love to see people's faces in workshops when I do it. The end of the 3 minutes, they're relaxed, they're laughing. We debrief it, and they're like, it felt giddy. It was silly. It was fun. I felt like I had a little mental vacation. So we're not tackling perfectionism in all areas. There's areas that we need mastery. We need to be whatever it is, more precise in ourselves. We just don't need it in every single area. And what happens is if you've been rewarded for those perfectionistic tendencies, and many of us have, right? We are rewarded for hard work, for attention to detail, for executing with excellence, right? All the different buzzwords. We then start to apply that everywhere. Whereas if you build in a few of these exercises, it starts to rebalance how you're using your left and right sides of your brain. And it makes room for I didn't need to do anything perfect. That was just fun. And fun is addictive in a good way, right? You'll keep coming back to it. It's not necessarily a should, it's a I want to, and I feel good. I get the dopamine hits off it, the serotonin releases. So that is one of the ways I coach people who are deeply perfectionistic. Since I wrote my book, I've had people come to me and they lifelong dream is to write a book. And they're going round and round, can't get by a paragraph or a page. I'm like, no, no. 10 minutes a day, your goal is to write badly. They're like, no, no, I can't. I have to edit. I'm like, no, write badly. Have your goal be, I'm going to write badly. Do that for 30 days. Save it in a folder. It's a mess. You can delete the whole folder. It's 10 minutes. You never have to look at it again. Or if you choose to, and you find one nugget, one phrase, one idea. But that's where this perfectionism blocks so many people from dreams that they have because they're editing while they're doing the creative work.
Susan, I love this so much. You are inspiring. I feel like you've just given us the balance that we need, or the ebb and the flow, really, to understanding how those of us who are kind of still struggling, like, well, I was really good at this, and yet I'm not feeling that perfectionism over here in this area of my life. I think you just kind of released that expectation and pressure for us and gave us a really practical and creative, fun way to figure out how we can move forward when we are getting blocked by that pressure. And I want to believe too that all of our intentions around perfectionism are to do a great job, to be able to give, but at the same time, it can be a really a paralysis for us. So I feel like you've unlocked that. So thank you. I love that so much. I'm actually going to go buy a crayon or a pack of crayons and keep them on my desk. I hope our listeners will consider some of that too. But we're thinking about it from an individual point of view. Now we take it into the group, the team point of view. And so, how do we help our teams unlock that, especially when we're going through intense periods of change? And I say intense because change is constant. So, it's always change. Hopefully, we're always growing and changing. But when we're really navigating those somewhat tumultuous, or maybe it's just simply the unknown, and we as leaders don't even know where the path is going to take us, how do we help build up a resilience in others and maintain that creativity?
Right. One of my favorite exercises, and I've done it since I learned it. I did not discover it, so there's nothing original here, but I've probably practiced it for 18, 19 years with teams. And I've led international teams. I worked for a while in Hong Kong, and different scale projects, as well as small teams. And one of my favorite exercises for a leader to do is to get sort of the team together and acknowledge what you're facing. Right. So you can do this exercise in 2 hours, if you will. And this is what we're facing. This is where we're going. As a leader, you should ideally, right, have a vision. You know what you're trying to accomplish. This is the goal. If you don't, right, you need to back up. Don't do this exercise without that. Make sure the team understands what's trying to be done, but then establish 3 to 5 what I call guiding principles. And what these do, and you let the team as well as you come up with them. And it's all about how we're going to work together. Because when you build trust and camaraderie, right? If you go back to my first situation, there was no trust, there was no camaraderie, there was no support in that newsroom where I was being bullied. When you build that within a team, and there's a lot of ways to build it. I am not necessarily a fan of a team building exercise. They can be fun, but that doesn't, when you're actually doing the work and the grind of work, you may better understand them as people, but it doesn't make working easier. I like to set 3 to 5, I call them guiding principles of how you're going to manage as a team during this period, whatever that is. In constant change, it could be anything. And you come up with your own catchphrases. I've heard everything from assume misalignment, that you start every conversation because things are moving so fast, just assuming that you guys are on different pages. And the minute you say, hey, I'm just going to assume misalignment, here's where I am, where are you? It gets rid of all the why aren't you here and sort of the finger pointing. That's a favorite one that I've seen teams use. There's one about ruthless prioritization, like, is this really urgent? Is this just someone's sense of urgency, but doesn't move us to the goal? And you sort of sort. Another favorite is sort of, I'll use the phrase bitch and moan and move on, right? And highly recommend, because people need an opportunity to complain and vent, but it will drain the energy if there's too much. So they made that into an acronym that the team that came up with it actually put it on mugs and different things because they wanted to acknowledge they were in a really fast changing environment where they had very little control. Things were coming down to them. They had to do things that they may not have agreed with, meaning in a regulatory or that kind of environment. And yet you're going to do them, right? Because to not do them isn't okay. So there would be a period of, if you will, the bitching and moaning. And then they would say, and now we move on. And I love it. And teams come up with these. These aren't the leader, but when you can work with your team to come up with 3 to 5 of those, it builds. And then you use them because when a team has created them, they remember the phrases, you write it down. There's just a few. You don't need one for every single situation. I had one team come up with like, check before you wreck, which just meant don't lose your mind. Someone has sent this email, figure out or text, figure out what they mean before you have an explosion. And it was interesting what it says about people like check before you wreck clearly says maybe that team member got a little too anxious. So that's my single favorite. Like I said, I've used it for 18 years with countless different teams. And when done right, with the team coming up with them, with just a few, with the wordsmithing being with a sense of almost play and fun, builds trust, builds camaraderie, and helps keep teams aligned to the goal really, really well, and helps take, if I will, the monkey off the leader's back to solve everything, right? You have a team because you can't do it yourself. And many times teams will just look at the leader and it's like, no, I am one of this group. We're all contributing.
This is so powerful. I actually had a team meeting the other day where we all gathered and I shared with them, here's our challenge. We all have to figure this out together. Everybody, we whiteboarded our issue together and came up with a solution. I was so proud of them. I'm going to steal from this to Susan because this one's even, it's extra fun. And I was curious what my team members would put on the board, what they'd come up with as an acronym. That's a really great fun solution. What's a good story, if you will, or short example of transformation that you've seen through your coaching of an individual or a team that was in a tight spot, maybe similar to your own situation in your career, maybe completely different, but you got to see them transform through these exercises and realizations and the practice.
Sure. It was the one that comes most to mind was during a global software implementation. And quite honestly, it had been scoped wrong with the wrong time frame. And the team was not going to make the deadline. And not only not make, but not make it for by about 7 or 8 months. And it was a huge deal. The team felt that they had been set up to fail, that it was on them, and yet it was an unrealistic time. The time frame was set without anyone really understanding. And I think sometimes we are dealing with things like that using a couple of these exercises, quite honestly, and some creative play. We would start team meetings with a corny joke. And that sounds so silly, but just to break tension. So it's not a lot of time, but it's that sense of what laughter does, what music does. It's this is where we are. This is how we may look to the organization, right? I mean, and it's recognizing all that. It's not sugarcoating it and it's not allowing a team to stay in a victim spot, but through these check-ins, through building in some other creative practices, through building in some and you're asking the team what they like. The team really turned around. Many people say it was one of the best teams at the end of the day they'd ever worked on. They learned more about themselves and about others. So that's the one where you take something that was like in flames and people were very, very upset. And through a few consistent practices can really shift it.
It sounded like they needed that balance of bitch and bone, and then now we move on, problem solve. Yeah,
Absolutely. And yes, and then how do you inject that little bit of lightness, that little bit of humor, because everyone could get so ground down, that left side of the brain just churning, churning, churning. What is the little joke of the day? The little corny joke? What is the very small thing, right? We've talked about art journaling to just give us that little bit of balance, that little bit of perspective so that you look up and, not sound silly, but it's like someone was a fan of that. The sun will come up tomorrow. It's like we feel like this will not. And yet Earth continued to spin, the sun continued to come up, right? We continue to take a breath.
it reminds me of that idea of you not taking yourself so seriously. We can take our work seriously, but
Yes.
we're all human.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to the positive solution. The sun will come up. Yeah, I think that's a great application of it and great story. What's something that you would love for folks to know, take away, or start implementing as soon as possible in their leadership practice?
So I think really great leadership comes first from knowing yourself. I really do think that self reflection and people listening to your podcast are probably already in that space. So I would say if you already feel you're understanding yourself, give yourself a play practice. It can be short, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, because in many cases we need that better balance. We need to get into our right brains. And I'd say that challenges right now in leadership and the pace of change is so much greater that we really need to be using our whole brain. And in our society and the way we've been taught to be leaders, it is imbalanced and it's a little too left brain. So play is really, I think, the way. 10 minutes to that better, more holistic balance.
Love it. Susan, I'm going to pick up a pack of crayons and start doodling and journaling. You have me convinced. You really didn't have to convince me. As soon as you started sharing your stories, I think I feel the impact and the energy. So thank you for sharing all of that. It's a lot of great value and wisdom for all of us to glean from and learn from. I want to make sure that people can learn from you more and read your book and get in touch with you. So where would you like people to visit you online?
Easiest place is just my website, which is just susan-hensley.com. The book is Art for Your Sanity, so it's easy, and you can buy that anywhere you buy books. It's on Amazon, all those good places.
We will have all those links below. I'm going to grab my copy and get right to the art and the creativity, making space for that. Thank you all for making space for this episode of Bad Bosses, Great Leaders. And thank you, Susan. It has been a pleasure. I hope you'll come back and join us for more conversation.
I'd love to. Thank you.